Obviously, there's limitations to the amount of seating in this space, so we apologize and we'll just do the best we can. My name is Mark Diller. I am the chair of Community Board 7, and we are about to have a discussion about a matter that was adopted by the Transportation Committee, referred to the full board at the December 3rd meeting, and then the vote of the full board sent it back to this committee for further proceedings, and that's what we're about to have. There's been, I have received a lot of communications from you folks, and I'm grateful for it. I tried at first to respond to every single one of you individually, but you overwhelmed me. I confess that I just got, I got so many of them that I couldn't do it. So I apologize if you didn't get a personal response from me. It was just time and not a lack of will or interest. One of the things that this discussion has prompted is a number of concerns about our process, and one of the things that I want to talk about right now is where we're going to go from here. One of the things that I am hoping to do in my tenure as chair of the board is to work toward greater than majority consensus. This may be one of those issues that defies that, but I'm still going to give it a shot. And so what we're going to do this evening is we're going to have a discussion. Actually, one thing I should take back. We talked a little bit before about what is a community board and so forth. I want to make a distinction for you. Would the members of the Transportation Committee please raise their hand right now? And then those, hands down, thank you. And then those who are members of the board but not members of the Transportation Committee. So there's a few of us here. Thank you, Jeanette, for joining us too. So when we take votes, there'll be a separate vote for the committee members and then the non-committee members, in case that when you see that happening, you're wondering why people are voting or not voting at different times. So the community board, remember I spoke before about our job is to be advisory to various city agencies. The way that we do that, and there's only one way we do that, which is through a resolution that's adopted by our full board colleagues, and there are give or take 50 of us at full board. So a committee action is preliminary to that. So the resolution that you just saw us adopt, having to do with the sidewalk and 3 Riverside Drive, is on hold until it gets presented at full board, and then our full board colleagues will vote on it, and then it'll become a statement by Community Board 7, not before. What we're about to do is discuss another resolution that has already been to the full board once, is now coming back here, has been significantly revised, and Howard will lead you through the process of what it now says and where it's going. I am aware that folks have seen the text of this resolution, which speaks to a study and no other action but a study. But I understand that there's skepticism about that among some folks, perhaps some folks in this room. I don't want to speak for you. So one of the things that occurs to me is that there's a big turnout here. There was another big turnout at full board. And the thing that I want to try to get toward is consensus, and it occurs to me that a big meeting like this may not be the best opportunity to forge that consensus. We'll do everything we can. So what I am asking, what I've decided, I'll take the heat and I'll take the blame for this. What I've decided is that the committee will do its work. I will not interfere with the committee's work. It will reach whatever result it reaches tonight. But the result will not be presented at the January full board meeting. We will delay that. We will postpone that, at least until the February meeting, in order to allow for smaller group conversations to occur. And I will be working with our council member and various other folks who want in on that to try to facilitate smaller group conversations about the issues that you're about to hear discussed. My goal is to get a greater level of consensus than we are likely to be able to achieve in a mass setting like this. We will still hear from you tonight. If you look around the room, you see that there's an awful lot of folks here. And so we're gonna do something that I really don't like to do, which is to limit by time how much people can speak at a committee. Ordinarily, committee is where you get to speak and fully express yourself. but I don't think, it's now 7:45, and I don't think anybody wants to be here past Stephen Colbert. Certainly I don't. So we'll try to manage that. Yeah, we'll have to set some rules, so I think we're gonna have to say 1 minute, I'm sorry for that. So think now about what you wanna say. Second thing also is, if someone else said what you wanna say, please just say, I agree with the last speaker or so-and-so. And I promise you that my colleagues around the table and around the room will not only pay the same attention, but they'll be grateful, and maybe that's a good thing for you. And that we will then have opportunities between now and February to hear from some of you, and maybe some of you would prefer to be heard in a smaller group than a larger group. But I think that this is something that I am asking my committee and my board to try, because I want to get us toward a more complete result, and that's what we're ultimately trying for. So that's my spiel on this. If there are any questions about the process I've just laid out, I see 1 or 2 hands, and then I will hand it back to the chair of the committee for the proceeding. Yes, sir.
Okay, it seems to me that the
Excuse me.
process, hi, my name is Paul Schreiber.
Yes, you're one of the ones I didn't get a chance to respond to, so thank you
No
for
problem,
being here.
no problem. Process to me is, if the board rejects the committee's proposed resolution, which it did, and wants something different, and you've got all this community input available, why is there, take a resolution, then discuss it, then bring it to the board? Why not discuss, form a resolution, bring it to the board?
So if folks didn't hear the comment from Mr. Schreiber, it was, why not hear the community input before voting on a resolution? And my answer is 2 things.
Not just voting on a resolution, drafting a resolution that will hopefully reflect a consensus, not just of the committee, but of the community.
So my answer to you, sir, is this. I believe that having something that's passed the committee will frame the dialogue for that subsequent or next step. And until the full board votes on something, it is not a statement of anything by anyone. And therefore, there's an opportunity to be heard and to influence. That's my answer for you. It is or is not sufficient, but that's my answer for you. I've got to move this along, so forgive me. One more question, and then we're going to move along.
Just one question. What is the mechanism by which you would amend the proposal here if the various subcommittees or whatever reach a consensus outside of this committee and want to materially adjust the proposal?
I will be personally involved, and Howard and I will talk, and full board is a meeting that I chair. So anything that is relevant to any resolution on my agenda for the February full board is something that I promise you I will have input on and attention to. I neglected to say one other thing, which is I have a separate yellow sign-in sheet. So I encourage everyone, please, to sign in on the white one. That just tells me you were here and tells everyone how important it was for you to come out tonight. If you were interested in taking part in one of these small group conversations, please also sign in this. I'm going to put it on that railing over there by the divider in between the board offices and this space. Please sign in, and please print legibly, because the purpose of this is so that I can get in touch with you later, and it doesn't work if I can't read your handwriting, okay? With that, I'm going to hand it back to Howard, and we'll get going.
Thank you, Mark. At the risk of possibly disappointing everyone, if you look at the resolution, there probably is a great deal of consensus on it. The resolution is printed on the back of the agenda tonight, and the first paragraph, I'm not going to read it, but it cites the fact that we suffer from traffic congestion, double parking due to e-commerce deliveries, significant cruising for parking, and a substantial number of injuries to street users. We all see these conditions on the street, and what we have before us is a resolution asking the city for input on how to improve the situation. That's it. So I think the way we're going to handle it tonight is we're going to open it up to comments from the community. You don't have to speak tonight. You can submit your comments in writing, and they'll be possibly even more effective because we'll read them at our leisure. And, but what I implore you to do is to read the resolution. I hope there are enough copies for everyone, and try to respond to what is actually on the agenda. Free parking is not on the agenda tonight. It may never be on the agenda. What's on the agenda is a request to the city for help with these specific problems. The resolution this committee adopted back in the spring is gone. That's not here tonight. What's on the agenda tonight is, as I said, a request to the city for help with these problems. I think we need help with these problems. We all pay taxes to hire experts who can help with these problems, and this committee needs to hear from them to do their work. So that's what's on the agenda tonight. And with that, first a comment from Roberta, and then we'll open up to the community.
That this is a request to DOT to come back with more information and study, which will then come back to the board if it passes. And at which time the board will not just say, okay, that's great. The board will then have a dialogue again with the community about whatever the findings are, and may say, we like what DOT has come back with, or we don't like it. So this is the first step in a multi-step process.
It's not even really, it's just gathering information. It's not even a real step. It's just learning about the journey. In any event, let's get the process started, because none of us want to be here late. Everyone, again, comment on what's in front of you, and please try to limit it to 1 minute, and you'll give and state your name clearly, and let's go. Who's taking the turn?
What are we raising the hands for?
We probably need a timer.
Sarah is taking time.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Leonard Daniels. I live at 89th Street in West End, and you have traffic congestion because some people are elitists. And the bottom line with everything, I say that to get people's attention. The bottom line with everything is we need to get our parking spaces back, not lose spaces. I'm all for people using their bikes, pave the roads. I'm all for people using mass transit. Mass transit will not get better if we lose our spaces. Mass transit will get worse. We need to get our spaces back, put the bike racks on the sidewalk, Howard, or give up your garage space, okay, because you are conflicted, no offense. And the bottom line with everything is, reduce alternate side. We're not talking about people getting fired. They don't come out most of the time anyway. It's about raising revenue. This is a perfect example. Look on this block on 87th Street. Why is it no standing? Because the elites don't want us to have cars. Meanwhile, Howard can park his car anywhere he wants. And I'm saying that to get people's attention, but the man shouldn't be on the board. But that's a whole nother issue entirely. The bottom line with everything is, we need to get our spaces back. Take the bike racks, put them on the sidewalk, pave the road so people who want a bike ride can bike ride.
Pave the
I have a clue.
I obviously.
Pave the course!
Please. Okay. Hang on. Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say something that I said at full board. We are going to have a conversation about the merits of a disputed issue. It's very important that we hear what you think about that issue. We are not going to have a conversation about personalities or people. Let's talk about the issues.
Mark, that's all part of it.
Very nice.
These are the ground rules. If that's something that you can't deal with, then I invite you to talk to me later and separately. I said the same thing about, we're gonna cast no aspersions on people
No
about.
aspersions at all, but-
Please. I'm trying to run a meeting that gets to a good result. We're not gonna cast aspersions on people who park or need cars or feel that they park or need cars. We're not gonna cast aspersions on people who have a different point of view. This is what community is about, and this is how we're gonna run this meeting. Okay?
Thank you.
We'll go through the audience.
I guess just maybe like you wanna, like.
Why don't you just go through the audience with the
Okay,
mic?
so these three people,
Yeah, we'll just go in order.
your 1 minute and then pass it down.
Hi, I'm Valerie Rubson, and I live on
Thank you.
93rd
I
Street.
realize that.
I am a car owner, Rubson, R-U-B-S-A-N. I'm also a bike rider. I have 3 kids who ride their bikes. And all I want to say is I applaud you guys for volunteering and helping us look at these issues, and I think it's a great idea. Get more
Sorry.
information to you.
Thank you for addressing the resolution.
My name is Charles Gross. I am a resident of the Upper West Side and the author of the play how I found an affordable apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan without really trying. Given that the previous language of this resolution was intentionally or not biased against cars, and given that every similar situation in the city, every study in the city has in fact begun with the assumption that cars are the enemy, I suggest in order to truly have a non-biased study that the following language be included in any proposal. The study should include an investigation of the need for free parking on the Upper West Side and consider the possibility of ways to increase such parking should this need be established. Further, given the price of garage parking on the Upper West Side, the study should consider the possibility of allowing or even requiring developers to include parking facilities in new buildings.
And Sam Zeidman, live on Central Park West Side, and Zulu Echo, Z like zebra, Z like zebra, E-I-D like David, M-A-N. So just a quick couple of points. First one, again, want to thank the board for even moving us to this possibility of exploring things. This is something that went into effect in the 1950s. If you manufactured a car in the 50s, you could not get away with manufacturing the same car anymore because our views on the things we know about emissions and their impact on society and safety have changed. And I think it's analogous to look at the role of the storage of the cars in the same way. We're not necessarily eliminating it, but we are recognizing that we know a lot that we didn't know in the 50s, and we should incorporate that. I would also like to say that there's been a lot of focus, even in considering the study, on these perceived negative things to car owners. But I think there's a lot of positive things that could come out of this if there is parking reform that can balance the market a little bit and bring the people who would not ordinarily drive away, the people who need it most could have it.
Hello, my name is Peter Tura. I've been on the Upper West Side for about 30 years. I agree with this gentleman 100%. Every week I see more and more and more space. I'm a very observant person. Like President Trump, I'm very observant. But every week I see more and more spots disappearing. Just last week on 93rd and Riverside, 2 spots disappeared. Now we have in front of my building this crazy pull over to unload the car, which I've never seen anybody do that yet, except the people who have permits that now have perfect spots to park because they have these permanent parking spots. So, you know, you want it both ways. You want to keep taking spots away, and then you complain because people are going around in circles looking for spots. I did come actually for the parking situation about charging free parking, not allowing parking. But since this came up and you don't want to talk about that, look at what you're doing. Every single week, more and more spots are taken away from us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I don't have I didn't. Thank you.
Everybody, everyone's got that minute of thing.
Hi, I'm still Laura Gabriel. Thank you all very much. And I think for me, you know, I've lived in the Upper West Side for 46 years. I had a store here, and I live in a rent stabilized apartment, and somehow this conversation is reminding me of rent stabilization. And I really think that this city is becoming so expensive. Like, I could not live here if I didn't have a rent stabilized apartment. I couldn't do the work I do if I didn't have a car. I couldn't have a car if I couldn't park it on the street. And the same thing, my husband, he's 70, I'm gonna be 73, both are women. And, you know, it's really, for me, it's again, you know, government or interfering with our rights. And it feels really inappropriate. I'm glad it's going to be a discussion. I would like to talk to you about participating in a way. And I do feel like we must have respect for each other. You know, it's like we're in a democracy. That means everybody gets to speak, and we don't speak disrespectfully. Thank you. And I will be back. I will return.
Hi, my name is Clara Boyd. I'm a neurologist. I live on West 77th. I just want to echo something this gentleman said about bias during studies, even in terms of the variables you select. how they're itemized, how they're analyzed, and how data is presented. So I think there's a lot of bias here, and I think that before the decision is made to pursue a study, we should have community input. If I want to show Oreo cookies were associated with Alzheimer's, I could probably do that. So I think the same is with this, it's very biased, and a study that is biased is not an accurate study.
Thank you.
Paul Schreiber again. I also want to point out that as we cut parking in the neighborhood, and we are cutting parking in the neighborhood, as this gentleman pointed out, 25 spaces in this immediate 2-block area are gone in the last 4 years. 25. As we do that, it's going to cut commerce. You need input from merchants as well. There are going to be fewer groups getting together on the Upper West Side, fewer people in the restaurants, etc. If people don't know that there's going to be a place to park, they're not going to come here. And that holds true, by the way, for the ballet and the opera too. You need to know that what's being spoken of in these forums is much bigger than just whether or not a bike lane is going to replace some cars. It's the whole gestalt of a neighborhood. This neighborhood is traditionally one with parking. I'm one person who chose to live here because I knew I could keep a car. And it's important. And it's important to a bunch of people who aren't harming anybody.
Hi, my name is Barbara Rice. I'm not a cyclist, I'm not a driver, I'm not a pedestrian, I'm not a stroller pusher, I'm not a wheelchair, right? I'm all of the above. In other words, we're complex and we're multiple, and I want to build actually on something that I think a gentleman, Mr. Zeidman, said before, and that is, as difficult as change may be, times do change, and it wasn't that long ago where we were all sitting, for example, in bars and restaurants with cigarette smoke, and when there was a move to ban that, there was a lot of resistance, and a lot of people who felt very strongly that it was their right, or their will, or their, whatever, to maintain that. But we do know that there are adverse effects, and I think there should be openness and certainly an interest to get more information and studies about all the ways that sidewalks, curbs, and streets are used, and how the changes in the use can support our general health overall, and not any one individual or one cohort's desire.
Like the Spanish Portuguese, right? We get rid of all the Sephardic, right?
My name is Ira Gershon-Horn. Very few of these comments are related to what's on the
Fucking
paper.
idiot.
I did not intend to speak, but a lot of people here are telling us things that they assume are facts, and they're passing them off as facts, and I don't know if they are facts, and they don't prove them, and a study would prove them, or come a little bit more. I just don't get it.
Hi, my name is Beth Oram, O-R-A-M. I'm here because I represent a silent majority, and that's actually the majority of people on this island and in this neighborhood that don't drive. No, I don't cycle. I wanna call attention to what this gentleman said earlier about taking away a few feet of sidewalk. And the term he used was privatizing public space. We can't do that. We can't privatize public space. Well, a long time ago, we gave public space away to private cars. And all we're saying is, folks, can we talk? Can we talk? Because actually, this lady referred to a right. It's actually not a right. It's something that we've agreed upon. This lady said things have changed. Things have changed. Can we please talk?
Hi, my name is Christine Palma. Not all jobs are in New York City. Oh, my name is Christine Palma. So not all jobs are in New York City. In my field of physical medicine, I literally make double the amount of money working in New Jersey than in New York. So it makes sense for me to commute 10 miles in my car to work in Jersey. It's a 30-minute drive. The only people when I'm out commuting are Ubers. That's what's causing the congestion. If I take mass transit, it's 2 hours. So if I don't work in Jersey, I can't afford to live in this neighborhood. There's no manufacturing jobs in the city. It doesn't make sense. you know, a lot of people that like living in the city shouldn't be limited because jobs are not in the city. It's only finance and things where you can have compact space. You look at I just moved here from Silicon Valley. Most people in San Francisco commute down south to San Jose because that's where the jobs are. You shouldn't be forced to live next to our jobs. Like 10 miles is not a far distance. With my salary, I can't afford a $1,000 more spot.
Louise Simon, 86 in Columbus. It is my understanding that the resolution involves a great deal of bias, and I concur with you. Here it is set up under issue 2. At the close of that, benefit improved traffic flow, including but not limited to. The rest of this resolution should be struck.
Hi, my name is Jane Lubart, and I have been a resident of the Upper West Side for 40 years. I raised my kids here. We've heard this before. I have 2 daughters who now live in LA, and one is in Santa Monica, and they have a really good resident permit system for cars. I mean, it's not logical to expect people to give up their cars. And most people that I don't know anybody in New York City who actually is a 2-car family. So we have 1 car, and we had 2 kids, and my husband still works, and he is using his car for work. And when I was working, we used a garage, but since I was laid off from the newspaper industry, we are very happy that we were able to stay in our apartment and age out and have parking that's closer than the garage was when we had to pay $700 a month. Thank you. Very good, thank you.
My name is Burton Josephs. I live at 140 Riverside Drive. I just have an issue with some of the assumptions that led to this resolution, primarily cruising. People who park their cars regularly, residents, if any of you have done that, you know that come at 9:30, you are sitting in your car, either you're double parked or you're on Riverside Drive, sitting on the designated area. There is very little cruising. The cruising takes place later in the day when people come into the city. So the assumptions that you are making about us contributing to traffic, they're parked cars, they're not driving. I counted the other day, there are 65 cars per street between West End and Riverside. That's every 10 blocks is 650 cars. The impact of limiting parking or making it more difficult to park is going to weigh on thousands of people. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is David Vassar. I live in Morningside Heights. I'm a cyclist since I came to New York in 1990. David Vassar, Vassar like the college. Yeah, no relation. That I know of. So yeah, I'm a lucky guy, as I try to point out at every meeting. I mean, I'm a cyclist. That's how I get around the city. I love it. It's enjoyable. It's eco-friendly. And you know, and it's quiet. And it's such a great experience to cycle around New York City in a protected bike lane. And as I age, a protected bike lane is the best way to get around town if I'm cycling. So in contrast to using that space to store privately owned cars, I don't think there's any contest. So I think this study is not asking that much, but it's maybe an approach to questioning what I think is this long-standing and outrageous tradition of using that space for the storage of private property, especially given that this private property causes a lot of deaths, crippling injuries, and is a big contributor collectively to climate change. I mean, do we want our kids to inherit a 5-row parking lot?
Time is over.
My name is Stephanie. I've lived here a couple of years. Stephanie Campbell, like the suit. Again, no relation. I'd be here. I'd have a mansion probably. I need a car for my job. I'm an attorney. I represent various hospitals. Some of them city hospitals. Some of them upstate. Some of them all over the place. So I have to go to Putnam County. I have to go to Orange County. I have to go to Nyack Hospital. I need a car for that. I can't get around without a car. I can't afford a house because I have fucking debt. because of my goddamn law school loans. So, I don't know, $200,000, I can't get a house. What do you want me to do? So there's no solution here for anybody that wants to keep their car. I see all this talk about getting rid of cars. What do you want to do with the rest of us that need the cars for our jobs? It's not a matter of this being a cigarette and we shouldn't have our cars because it's unhealthy for other people. Some of us need it for our jobs. What are you gonna do for our generation that doesn't have any other recourse? We exist as well.
Let me just interject, if we could try to keep the comments to the resolution from us. This does not propose to get rid of parking, this does not propose to charge parking. This proposes to ask the city if they have ideas to improve our streets. So I implore you to keep your comments to that.
I just want to mention that I'm going to lose my way of living. Abraham Pariente.
No relation to anybody.
Yeah. Thank God. I just want to point that I'm going to use my way of life. I'm an artist. I carry painting all day long. If I lose my parking spot, so-called, I have to leave the city. And I don't see myself continue doing what I'm doing right now if I don't have a car. If you take the space of that car takes in the street and you calculate by square feet, you will see that if you eliminate more parking space, the price will go so high for parking, it's going to be more expensive than Tokyo. It's going to be $1 million spot because the greedy landlords are going to use the situation and they're going to increase the prices up and up and up. This is human nature. And some people are disconnected from reality. They live in this glass tower of theirs and they think they can go by this utopia theories, and they don't see the regular people. Every person here, I know half of the people here.
That's why we're seeking information.
Thank you.
Scott Rademacher, Upper West Side, 78th Street. How did this even come about? I just have to understand, how did this even come about? Why is there an issue with parking? I get there's congestion, and I appreciate the resident parking possibility. I can understand that. But at the same time, you're dealing with commerce, and I understand there's Fresh Direct and Amazon, we have those issues. I get that too. Those are on major thoroughfares such as Amsterdam. But when you're talking about side streets such as residential streets, for people who work here and need their cars, that's a different story. So while I'm all for the committee going to the DOT and asking for a study, this is something that needs to be very carefully thought about, because you will not only impact the people who actually live in this neighborhood, you will impact the ability for this neighborhood to actually
be a neighborhood.
Gain money and have business thrive. I mean, I know plenty of people who come in here, come in here, visit, and park their car and have a good time. So.
My name is Rick Titone, West 83rd Street. I'm really concerned with how the neighborhood is going to evolve in 2021 when the city implements congestion pricing south of 59th Street. I worry that the neighborhood is going to be overrun with people who doesn't seem very well. But I'm worried that we're going to lose more parking from people parking up here so they can avoid the congestion pricing and trying to leave their cars here while they work downtown during the day. And it's going to make a bad situation even worse. I would like to see some way to avoid filling the streets up with more cars sitting idle most of the week. I know many of you do have to work daily and drive your cars daily. I appreciate that. But many of us have to get around the city without cars, and we appreciate the ability to use bikes and walking and not being worried about where we're going to be. We can use that space more effectively if we just ask the questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Michael Minahan. Just consider, those of us who have special needs children, I need my vehicle. Do you ever try taking an autistic boy in the subway with rude-ass New Yorkers? And I'm a New Yorker and I'm rude sometimes. Impossible. Very impossible. And sanitation trucks, talk about congestion. Same time in the morning as the bus comes to pick up the children, there's a sanitation truck. Same time. 40-minute delays coming down the block. I live on West 75th at Columbus, Central Park West. That's a long run. It's 40 minutes off the top. So please take in consideration special needs kids. It's a growing problem and we need our vehicles.
Hi, Josh Pinkerton, live on 76th in Riverside. I'm firmly in favor of the study. We know what parking costs drivers. It's nothing, it's $0. Even a reduced fare Metro card costs $60 a month. So we need the study because we don't know what free parking costs the rest of us, the 70% of people who don't own cars in this neighborhood. The one study we have showed that 15 blocks on the Upper West Side, cruising for parking created about 366,000 vehicle miles and 325 tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually. That's just 15 blocks. Those hundreds of thousands of miles of cruising cause congestion, they cause air pollution, they slow emergency response times, and they contribute to climate change. In order to make a better neighborhood, we need more information, and we need to know what free parking costs the rest of us. Thanks.
Hi there, Lauren Kerr on West 76th Street, KERR. I don't mind the idea of having a study. I think I agree with the neurosurgeon, wherever she is, she's smarter than I am. But there's a bias to asking DOT for, and being the only source of a study, because we already know what their conclusions will be. There was a gentleman in the general meeting that suggested we use another service. I forget. He graduated from some. Do you know what I'm talking about?
RPA.
Yeah, RPA. I mean, maybe we go with something like that or something alternative. But going with the DOT, I feel is just not a. It's unbiased or it's biased.
Or AAA.
Or AAA. Two other things: reserving spots for construction and delayed lights. Can you guys look at that too? Delayed traffic lights, I've seen so many people almost get run over. We talk about traffic accidents here. I think that's one of the bigger problems.
Where am I going? There we go.
Hi, Lisa Orman. I think this rewrite is awesome. I think it's a great step forward. It sounds like a lot of people are afraid of a study. I'm not, and we're really excited about this resolution. Our curbs haven't changed in 70 years. It's time to study them and decide how they should function. And the community board needs to represent all of us, not just the parkers. Our current curbside benefits the minority at a huge cost to everyone else. And the world in our society is changing. The internet has transformed how we get our goods, which has changed the demand for curbside space. The way we do things evolves constantly. We need a rational system that maximizes the public benefit for our limited public space.
Hi, my name is Bill Weiss. I live on West 86th Street. And I think everybody is all for quality of life and a safe neighborhood. And quite frankly, I want to mention that everybody should read the article in the New York Times about congestion in the city that they recently had about all the trucks. And, I grew up in California. I have a car. I park on the street. Yes, I went through the change where we all had residential parking only from everybody else, and we all survived it. There are people that have cars in this neighborhood that need them for various reasons, whether it's work, whether it's caring for an elderly parent that lives outside of the city, like when my mother-in-law was in hospice care and we went up every day, okay? But there are also people who work in this neighborhood, who live outside of this neighborhood, and I think about the West 87th Street Rehabilitation Center. You tell a nurse or a doorman or a porter coming out of the building at 1 a.m. when their shift is over, take public transportation to Yonkers or Staten Island or Queens. Sorry, I went over.
Hi, my name is Mindy Haskell. I'm on West 107th Street. I've lived here for 10 years. I hope to be here for another 40. So hopefully the next 40 years will be, quality of life will be better than the past. And that's why I look forward to this study. We have a chronic problem of double parking, and I have a ton of videos on my phone of emergency vehicles stuck behind a double parked car for several minutes, and the car doesn't move. And the reason that we have so much chronic double parking is because single parking, curbside parking, is for free. It's $0, except if you want to sit in the morning for 2 hours and idle your engine, then you get to win that parking space. And that's not a win for anyone. So why not ask the question and find out what's going on what the options are. Those who are against even seeing a study are afraid to know that maybe an alternative would be better.
We pay taxes.
Hi, my name is Steve Eichblatt. I live on West 85th Street. I support the study, and I think I understand that people need cars, some people need cars, but it doesn't seem fair the way the parking is allocated. And I think if I had a choice, I would prefer sidewalks to cars because I walk and everybody walks, but not everybody drives. So that's my thing.
Up here, maybe?
I think we're ready to come up this way. Back there? Oh, well, let's hit Brad while we're here, and then, not hit Brad, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Brad Taylor. I live at West 94th Street. I just wanted to commend the board and the committee for going forward with trying to get some more data and doing this study. I mean, it devolves into parking versus not parking. I mean, if you read the resolution, what we're trying to do apparently is to improve traffic flow and to get some more data on how that might happen. You know, one of the things about improving traffic flow is that, as someone else mentioned, you've got all these double parked trucks that can't get to the curb.
There's no parking spaces back there.
My name is Guy Rice. I've lived here for 36 years, and I strongly support the motion or the resolution. Many good things have been said so far. I just want to add one other thing. That is that it's time for New York City to climb in the quality of life studies. We're constantly at the bottom of all major metropolitan areas around the world. And there are many European cities where we can learn from. And I hope that the study will not be parochial, but we will look truly at, as a global leader, at best practices around the globe.
Okay. Well, no, I want to be done with one side, then we'll just go to the other.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Sam Kerr. I live on 92nd. Sam Kerr. I, for one, actually think doing a study is a good idea. I do agree with the other people in the room who said that the way it's framed now, at least the way it's been framed in this conversation, is biased, both by the people who have cars and by the people who don't have cars. The reality is that next year, after congestion pricing is implemented within the city, we're going to be back here having a similar meeting saying, why haven't we had any study and why weren't we more prepared for this? I, for one, actually think that having resident permits would be a good idea. New York's one of the few cities in the world that do not have them, and they don't necessarily need to be paid. Why can't people in our neighborhood have preference spots with residential permits, or have the side streets reserved for them? And other issues are people who are parking after there's been alternate sides who take up 2 and potentially 3 spots. There's lots of things that need to be studied, and having a study isn't necessarily bad. But necessarily the conversation that we've seen here today is the one that's bad, where there are people who are against cars who are hoping that this will get rid of all of them, and the people with cars want them to stay everywhere.
Okay. Oh.
Hi, my name is Ann O'Shea. I live on West 87th Street. I came in late, so some of you may have already said this, but I'll just put my 2 cents in. I would love to be able to ride a bike all over the place, but I am terrified of cars. I own a car, and I support a study, but I also oppose this kind of knee-jerk reaction to bicycles being the answer to everything. I'm terrified of bike riders who go zooming past people. I'm terrified. I've known people who have gotten killed on the bike path going down the West Side Highway. Bike riders don't always obey traffic rules, and the danger to pedestrians, as well as to cars, as well as to bike riders, is immense. And while I understand that bicycles are ecologically more important, I think to just take the position that cars are bad is.
So, on to the right.
Mark, thank you for bringing a microphone to this side of the room finally. My name is Steve Gallagher. I live on the west side. I just want to thank the board members for their time and for taking our abuse. I am a car owner. I am not against a study of parking. My concern seems to be a bias on this board with certain board members who sit on transportation alternatives as board members. And over time, car owners' voices are not being heard. We should be heard, and we should come to an equitable solution to this. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Font. I also want to applaud the committee for pursuing this study. I think it's really important, especially with the explosion in e-commerce, which we see every Christmas time gets worse and worse. And I also want to say it's ironic, we all witnessed earlier in the meeting a detailed 15 or 20-minute discussion about the use of public space on the sidewalk for some planting. And there are people in this room that don't even want to look at the fact that probably 10,000 times as much space on our streets shouldn't be even considered, and there shouldn't be a conversation about that.
My name is Reed Ruby, and when I see all the curb space all over the city and on the Upper West Side, it's really an incredible resource that we all own. Just like we all own Central Park, we all own the curbside space. And I commend the board for their leadership in asking DOT to study basically the highest and best use for all of us in our public space. And the gentleman to my right made a comment about this board, something about transportation alternatives and about not hearing about parking or something. I've been sitting here all night. I've heard a lot of things about parking. So I'm not sure what your point was, but I have heard about parking.
Dialogue. Let's not have, I want to avoid the personal and just stick to the merits, hopefully the merits of the resolution, but the merits of the issues that are before us. So let's just leave that where it is, okay? Thanks very much.
My name is Mark Friedman. I live on West End Avenue. To make a comment upon the language in here, this does frame the discussion in about the most biased way I could ever imagine.
You didn't see the prior
Well, it is the conclusion you would draw from this language is there's a lot of congestions, people are getting run over, just get rid of curbside parking, put a price on it. Money is mentioned 5 times in here. I can see where this is headed. If you frame things and decide that surge pricing and metering and paid residential parking and pricing this, pricing that, I know what this study is going to do. This study is going to say, pay up, it'll reduce everything because only people with money will have access to parking.
Keep it for yourself.
We'll go around again.
Hello, my name is Henry Reinhardt, and on the point of money, it is amazing to me we've gotten this far in this conversation and had no mention of business. I want to thank the board, and I want to thank the board for this resolution. And change is our one constant, and when you face change, you study the variables. I support this, and I would ask for one amendment. Instead of studying how to improve traffic flow, I would ask that we study how to improve the business climate. For those of you who have affirmed that car drivers support our retail businesses, you are wrong. We are a pedestrian city, and that's why we call it foot traffic. Hey, you're taking my time. So, foot traffic is determined by safe streets and pedestrians feeling comfortable. Pedestrians are being killed by cars, so let's study the impact of cars in our community.
Yes.
So then
Hi, my name is Gloria Powell. I live on 87th and right down the block here. I agree with the study, but I would suggest, if possible, that we have two parties participate in the study. You're limiting it to one group to do the study. It would make sense to have two independent people do it and then do a comparison. With regards to this resolution that was written, I would think that it would stop right after it says promote improve traffic flow and promote safer streets and remove all the rest of it. Let them come back and give suggestions whether or not they feel that they want to charge for residential parking or give other stuff. I don't think we need to give them any hints as to what their possible solution should be.
So we're not gonna, we're only gonna hear from everybody once, but there are some people we missed when we came around, so I see you and you. Yeah. And did I hear you wanted to speak? There you go.
My name is Kathy Kirkchio, CURCIO, and I live on West End Avenue. And I just want to say that I do think that there is a bias in that a study is not what most people are about, and I can see from the faces of some of the board members, anytime someone says about a bias or mentions the need for parkers, for people with cars, that the smiles and the smirks, etc. There clearly is a bias, and we do need an independent study, and we're not opposed to a study. We need an independent study that will give information. 30% of people are important. I have a car because I work in Westchester, and I have a mother with cancer in Long Island, and I need my car. And I can't buy a space in a garage. And to think that 30% doesn't matter is ridiculous. There are curb spaces taken up by bikes, there are sidewalks taken up by bikes, and time is up. And I'm glad we got to discuss this little paragraph, because that's an insult in democracy.
All right, so I see Peter, and you had your hand up first, so we'll just come around this way.
I'd like to try to add a point that I don't think anyone else has raised. My name is Deborah Kamen, like the islands, except with a K. And I live at 91st and Broadway. The point being that it isn't true that our use of curbside space hasn't changed for many decades. It's simply not true. I mean, I understand that free street parking was implemented decades ago, but so much has changed in terms of adding the city bike stands and moving parking away from corners to make the streets safer. And a lot of changes have been made that affect congestion that were made deliberately to slow traffic down, because people were concerned about accidents and pedestrians being killed because of speeding vehicles. Now, those measures have greatly succeeded in slowing traffic down, but now the people who park are being blamed for it. It was being done on purpose. So I think that, in fact, something is owed to us as a community, because there are things that we have lost while we have gained other things in terms of safety.
Oh, okay, we'll just keep going around.
Yep. Rick Nelson, I live on West 76th Street, and I want to agree with some of the other speakers who asked for an independent study, because the city, in asking them for this, it was, as it's pointed out, a lot of these solutions would really make more money for the city, and actually money that would not come back to the community. So I think that an independent view that then we could have a debate around. The second thing, I think we can get one more parking space on every block. And what I would ask you to ask the city is to shrink the space around the fire hydrants. Other cities have 10 feet on either side. For some reason, New York City has 15 feet. And talk about something that hasn't changed probably since the days of horse-drawn carriages, I would ask that they shrink that space, and then you look at any block, and you'll get one more parking spot right out of that.
Peter and.
Thank you. I'm Peter Frischap. I've lived on the Upper West Side for 70 years. I support this study. It's long overdue because we don't have the data and we need it, and we need to look at best practices around the world. In Copenhagen, they have sensors under the parking spaces so that if you're looking for a parking space, you can actually find where it is, reserve it in advance, pay for it. Residential parking, things like that, are in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., most other cities around America have it. It favors those people who actually have to use a car to get to their ill parent in Westchester or for other needs. We need a study because we can talk about this forever until we have some more data on how the curb is being used. We just don't know, and we can't have an intelligent conversation, so thank you.
Anyone else?
Sounds like it.
Great. Well, we really appreciate your input, and we urge you, if there's something additional thing you think of or you haven't spoken and come up with an idea, you can always submit it in writing. So we're always happy. Oh, Mark?
I just want to say thank you to the community who turned out tonight on every aspect of this, because you did follow the procedure that I asked of you, and I know it probably wasn't easy to do. So I thank you for that, and now the committee is going to have its discussion, but this is great. Thank you.
How's the writing submitted?
Mark? Yeah. How do they submit a written comment? He'll write it on the board. Committee discussion. Who has a comment, point? Sarah.
It was asked by maybe a couple of people kind of where this came from, why we're even having this discussion. Maybe there were some intimations that there was some hidden reason for that. So I just wanted to address that because I think it was primarily driven by a couple of us on Penny Ridge, myself and Ken, I think really started this. And it was because we were looking at congestion pricing coming. We were looking at this issue, we kept seeing it at all of our meetings, of the double parked cars, of the cruising, of unsafe streets. There's no hidden reason why we brought this up except just to say that we were seeing these problems all the time. And I specifically have lived in other cities where they have residential parking permits, and I think it's crazy we don't have it here. So I wanted us to look at that specifically. And just so you all know, DOT is not interested in residential permit parking right now. They have no interest in it. They have specifically said they're not going to do it. So if we want them to look into it, we need to ask them, and that's part of this resolution. So if you park on the street on the Upper West Side, you should actually support this because we're asking for something that would benefit you. It might have a fee, but it would actually probably make parking easier. I wanted to say to Henry's point about reaching out to business, we have been talking to businesses, someone mentioned that. The feedback we've heard mostly from businesses is that they don't have a lot of people who drive to their business. We know there are some businesses that are sort of more destination businesses where they feel like people do drive and park, so we are listening and we're continuing that outreach and trying to listen to business. And the reason why we're asking DOT is because we are a city agency and we report to city agencies, and DOT is the agency that we report to, so that's who we send our resolutions to. And they report to us as well. And then I just wanted to echo Mark's comment. I think this discussion tonight was really, really congenial, and everybody was nice, and I think it felt really good to hear from everybody in this way. So thank you all for coming.
Let's just go around the table.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in the minority here. I have a lot of problems with this resolution, and at the full board, I abstained on it, but there's a number of reasons. In principle, I'm not opposed to this at all. However, I just don't understand the rush for pushing this now. I think that it's important to see what happens with congestion pricing. It's very possible that a lot of people who drive into work will decide to leave their cars in Westchester and take public transportation into the city. I don't understand why we can't work I think the resolution is disingenuous in that really I think you're asking for exactly the same thing you were asking for last time. You're asking for a study, and there's a limited number of solutions to anything you can do with curbside parking other than residential parking permits or non-residential parking permits, but just having to pay to park your car. I read very thoroughly Gail Brewer's study on residential parking permits throughout the world, and many of them are very flawed. And I wrote down a couple of comments. I don't know if you're interested in hearing them now, but as
I just want to say, I don't know if disingenuous is the right word, maybe ignorant is more appropriate for me, because I just don't know enough. You say there are only a certain number of finite solutions. I don't know what they are.
But, you know, I have looked at various parking situations and solutions all over the world. I actually went to Sweden and Denmark because I was interested in seeing how the bike culture worked there. And it works fantastically well, but they don't have cars there, they have bikes. So, I think that, first of all, to properly handle demand, the fees would have to be many multiples of a city like Portland, Oregon, which charges $390 for one permit, $585 for two. The fact that some would be willing to pay these high prices will do so at the expense of those who are not able to afford to do so, but also view their cars in the same essential way. And
I just want to say, off the top of my head, I can see a lower charge for other people. The point is, I don't know. The point, Barbara, I want to make clear is I don't know enough. You're making points.
I don't understand why at this particular juncture, and especially since the Broadway Task Force. Well, let me just finish, okay, and I'll wrap this up. But the Broadway Task Force, which you're on, has asked DOT to look into pedestrianizing Broadway between 73rd and 79th Street and come back to us with some of their studies and thoughts on the subject. So I just think that it's overkill to do all this at one time. And I think that we should wait until congestion pricing comes. It's only a year away.
Yeah, it's to get a sense of both sides.
As far as I know, the Broadway Task Force did not ask to look at pedestrianizing between 73rd and 79th. They asked for an overall study, and they're in the process of working on it. No, when the community board wrote the resolution several years ago, and this committee passed it and went to the full board and asked for a study of Broadway. It did not ask for specific. But we did not, that was not a resolution. So I think this is a really good discussion. When the resolution came up last spring, I refused to bring it to the full board because we had not had a forum. We had not had opportunities to have major input from the community. So I think this is an excellent, we did have the forum in October, which I thought was excellent. And we are having a very thorough discussion tonight, which I also think is excellent. I've been writing minutes, so I've been listening carefully to everybody's comments. I would hope that DOT would not do a bias study. They are a city agency. We are also a city agency. And if the study comes back and it's not what people want, or even if it is, we're going to do another group of meetings like tonight. We will also bring in experts from other organizations and much as we did at the forum who have other approaches. We will reach out to many organizations and the community again. So I think tonight is a really good start.
For me, tonight epitomized why I wanted to join the board in the first place. It was amazing to be able to hear everyone's perspective and their thoughts and their opinions on what it's like to live in the city. And I think that's what this board is all about. And I think one of the things that we should be working for as a board and as a community is to widen discussion and not limit it. And to do that, I think we need to be well informed. And we could have meetings upon meetings where we all talk about our experiences, we talk about where we're coming from, and we're not going to get anywhere unless we have buy-in from someone who's looking at the data, looking at the numbers. And so my view is that we need a study done as soon as possible, because congestion pricing is being implemented, climate change is a threat to our society, and there should be no reason to wait on this. And I think that the best way to conduct a study is to have it be as non-biased as possible, and so I want the language of the resolution to be as non-biased as possible. But I think it's crucial that we at least agree that a study is only going to help us have a more civil conversation, have a more well-informed conversation. And I appreciate everyone for coming here tonight, and I hope to hear more from the study and from everyone in the future.
So, I was one of the people, as Sarah said, who initially proposed this. I see congestion pricing coming, and I'm really worried what it's going to do to our neighborhood. I'm someone who has a car, I park it on the street. Every mile I drive looking for parking pains me. It's something, I know we have a really bad policy right now. We're rewarding people, sometimes me, for driving back and forth for way too long, polluting the air, congesting our streets, looking for that free parking space. And I know there's a sense that having a study looking at possible other solutions will make things worse for the community. That's not in any way the goal. The goal is to look at what we have right now and see, in my mind, we have a really bad policy right now. Right now, we're rewarding people for driving around in circles, and whoever drives around in circles long enough gets that free spot. Or those people who stay in the spot 4 times a week to move their car back and forth and get the spot right when it becomes legal, get rewarded as well. But that means that if they ever move their car, then once again, they're back in the cycle of driving around in circles looking for spots. I'm convinced that there must be a better way. I don't know what it is. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to come up with a solution. We happen to, as a city, have a team of experts at the Department of Transportation. I hate to think that so many people in this room just automatically think they're biased. They're the professionals that our city is paying for to come up with smart decisions. And they don't always get it right, but there are a lot of trained traffic experts who quite often they're dedicated to improving the streets and making things better. I think it benefits the community for us to look into it. We have what in my mind is a really bad situation right now that could be made better for everyone in this room. We should at least explore and see what that might be.
First of all, I want to say that Julian spoke so eloquently and from the mouth of babes, even though you're not a babe. You're a very intelligent young man, and I am so proud to serve with you. I'm not afraid of a study. I don't think anyone should be afraid of a study. We're all very intelligent people in the community and on the board, and if that study should be biased, I will be the first to call it out. I believe in this democratic process. Democracy is sometimes a little ugly and messy. You can go back to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams to think about that. So I like this spirited discussion tonight, and I really liked everything I heard, because it's the community, and that's what we're committed to doing, is reaching out and listening. So I heard the word bias a lot, and that does concern me. There is no one in this world that's 100% objective on anything, so we always have to remember that. So this resolution really germinated from the implementation, the upcoming implementation of congestion pricing. That is a fact that is in our south border of this district, and I think it's very important that we get ahead of it. So better now than, better early than too late. That's going to impact us because the words human nature were brought up, and of course, if there is a charge for driving south of that boundary, human nature will be to avoid that charge. And so we are going to have a good likelihood of people trying to park, and so residential parking permits was part of the consideration and thought, and it hasn't been determined yet. So we definitely want to get objective, not subjective. I do agree that this resolution is, first of all, it's so much better than I think we started off with, so kudos to all of us and all of you for the impact and the input. And I think that we can clean it up a little bit more, making it a little bit more objective, not subjective. There's a couple of statements in here that I think are mildly leading. There are some what I would view as friendly amendments. I did say at the full board I mentioned swapping out a couple of words. I'm happy to make the suggestions now or later, whatever. Chair. Okay. So
I'm also in light of Henry's comment on the third paragraph, last line, residents and businesses of our community.
Yeah.
So I would add that.
Yep.
And yours?
So on the third paragraph, second line, the city-owned land should be used to create. Create, I think, leads to the fact that we are agreeing to a change, which we may or may not ultimately do. So I'd like to swap the word create for the word for. So in other words, used for, right? On the third paragraph, this is also very mild and it's very subtle, but there are policies that could provide, that suggest that there are, and I would like to swap that word for might provide greater benefit. It might not. It maybe, I'm on the third, I'm sorry, fourth paragraph, third line. Swapping, yes, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, and the last is inserting the word study before practices. So this is fourth paragraph, right, study the practices of other major cities, just study. And that's it.
Okay.
Like a grammar issue there?
We'll fix, we would like it to be grammatically correct. I think that would be great.
Can I didn't realize we're suggesting changes.
Can everyone else get a chance to speak first?
So I guess just a quick comment on the nature of the discussion tonight. I think we're on an upward trajectory from where we started in the community, and my hope is that this will continue. I see this resolution as the beginning of a continued conversation that this committee and this board will have. The conversations about parking have existed on this board long before congestion pricing came into sort of the conversation. So my hope is that we will continue to work together. There have been a lot of discussions in previous meetings comparing the 70% to the 30%. Our community is 100%, and I think all those voices need to be considered in these discussions. And my hope is that whatever you decide, Howard, with how these conversations are going to continue on the committee, that we do that in a way that continues to be as productive as it was tonight. The one friendly amendment I would like to offer deals with the second paragraph, where the way this reads to me sounds like it could imply that there are residents and business owners who have concerns about congestion pricing. I think so. Okay, but I mean, I think the word implication, my thought was to change it to the impact of this policy and how it affects the surrounding neighborhood. So that's sure. So again, I just think that I would like for these conversations, also with congestion pricing coming in. DOT is here tonight. This stuff is, I think, yes, DOT is here. This stuff is going to change over the next year and after this goes into effect. So I would like for whatever we decide after this meeting to be somewhat malleable so we can move forward. That's it.
I don't think anybody here would disagree that our streets are dysfunctional right now. People on all sides of this putative issue. We've heard solutions ranging from expand parking to residential parking permits to eliminate free parking. What we don't know is what the high cost of our current approach is, and that's what we're trying to find out, and what the best, if there is a better way. There is no time like the present to do it. It may be that congestion pricing turns out there is not a single car that seeks parking on the Upper West Side. There would still, this would be the time to do the study because of the rest of the dysfunction on our streets, from the double parking to the cruising to the pollution. You could argue it should have happened a long time ago. And also just one statistical matter, the best estimate is that there are 9,500 free parking spaces on the Upper West Side, and there are 100,000 households, so we're talking, and that assuming that residents are occupying all of those 9,500 free spaces, that's less than 10% of the community. Not that they shouldn't be heard, every group should be heard.
Good
That
point.
is from a group called CORD, which is surveying cities, helping them with their.
First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for being so collegial tonight. I think some of us were expecting something a little different, and I think it was great. You gave us a lot of information, and it was very helpful. I just have a couple of comments. One, to talk about the bias, the whole point of giving this to the city is to take it out of our hands and put it in the city's hands. But then raises the question, which most people raise actually, of the city's bias. And all I have to say is this is not the Brookings institution here. They control us. They're our government. They control the streets. If they're biased, we need to go to the polls and vote for new people. That's the entity that controls the streets. So the point is that that's really the only game in town. We have only one government, and we need to hear from them. Candidly, when this committee was asked where this came from, and Sarah talked about where it came from, I will add something. And if you recall, I was literally driving up Amsterdam, and it was a one-lane avenue. I mean, literally one lane. There were double parked trucks on either side. That's ridiculous. And I know people think we have all the answers and we have all the expertise. I don't. And so I just want to hear from the city on what they can propose to improve the situation, and give us some credit, bias or no bias, to have the intelligence to recognize what would be helpful and what would not be helpful. This is not a big step in the process. All we're doing is asking for information, which will enable us to begin the process. So with that, I will ask the committee if they have any other specific, are there any additional comments or, non-committee members?
Can I say something? No, it's just the committee. Yeah, no, we're gonna have to keep it to the committee now.
I appreciate the collegiality too of the discussion, and at the risk of shattering it slightly. First of all, we have to ignore Julian because he's too young to drive. I agree with a lot of the people that, intentionally or not, there is a subliminal bias within this resolution, but it's also a lot better than it was before. And I also agree, contrary to what Howard just said about requesting a study from the city. As Sarah said, the city already decided it's not interested in permit parking. So right away, we have an entrenched bias. And secondly, we have an administration, both the mayor and the majority in the city council, that has said publicly on many occasions, has declared what their biases are, and in fact has official programs to carry out those biases. So I would urge changing the language of this resolution to asking that the city commission an independent study to do whatever it is that you decide the language of the resolution should be. I suggest it could be one sentence, which is the first sentence, which is commission an independent study to assess current policy regarding parking and curbside usage, period.
But just let me address that, Jane. Again, this is not the Brookings Institution. We're not looking for a study just to read a study. We're looking for a study to look for action items to change the street, and the city controls the street. If it's biased, that's the problem we have to deal with. That's the government. They control the streets. To the extent we come up with an independent study that says this is great, it's meaningless because they control the streets. We have to convince them and get them to come up with constructive
So, but
solutions.
you're asking them to convince themselves.
No, they're asking them to convince us. That's the difference.
One last procedural statement, if I may, and with the greatest respect for Mark, I think this idea of having it's something I feel really strongly about. The idea of having a committee meeting, having a vote, and not putting it on the full board agenda, but circumventing the process to have private, non-public meetings, I think is anathema to this entire process. I don't know because I wasn't prepared, but it may even be a violation of the open meetings law. But I think it's a bad idea. I don't, you're giving seating control over the discussion and the public nature of the discussion to groups that we don't know anything about. I feel very strongly we should adhere to the normal process. We've had an extensive discussion. We're going to have a committee vote. We should refer it to the full board and go through the normal procedure. And I'm not calling for any vote on that, but I would ask that we seriously reconsider that process.
So let's address the market. Yeah. So I think
I was going to wait to speak, but appreciating what Jay just said, the open meetings law requires us to make decisions in public, and I promise you we will. No decision will be made about any of these things. No vote will be taken in secret. Everything that comes from these small group meetings, I see you shaking your head, thank you. It is the same as if we were to splinter off and do research and come back to the group. Everything that comes from those conversations will come back to the group, and all of it will be duly reported. But my view is that we're not going to get to consensus in that way. If I fail, I fail, but there'll be nothing in secret and nothing that's hidden. So while I have the mic, and just to round out my comments, the idea of an independent study is a great one, but anybody other than the agency with whom we interact is going to cost money if we don't have it. So unless there's some magic somewhere that I don't know, that's essentially the source of research and information that we're going to have. I wanted to mention a couple of things about resident permit parking, first of which is that my understanding of the genesis of this whole discussion also was the advent of congestion pricing and the suggestion that came from the audiences to the committee that resident permit parking be an answer or at least explored. And so that's one of the reasons why I thought the whole discussion ought to be undertaken. I will also note, unless I'm much mistaken, that state law requires that resident permit parking as currently configured only charge an amount that roughly corresponds with the cost to administer it, so it's revenue neutral, not that it is a source of excessive revenue or revenue generation for anybody. And with respect to the rest of the resolution in terms of what it is that we want this study to delve into, our full board colleagues on a week ago, actually it was a week ago tonight, wasn't it? Wait, what's happened in a week? That our full board colleagues encouraged us to be more detailed about what it is we're asking to have a study about. Otherwise, you'd end up with a study that is left to the whim of the person doing the study, and that's not potentially as helpful as what we're asking for here. So, reiterate, nothing's going to be done in secret. We are going to ask people to express themselves, and then we will get back to the folks that make decisions in public with all of you there. Thanks.
Howard, I'm glad you brought up Amsterdam Avenue. they put a bike lane on a truck route, increasing the congestion, increasing the noise, increasing the pollution because these trucks are burning diesel. And so anyone who suffers from asthma and lives along that strip is made to suffer more. And my problem with the study, with the city who put that bike lane there, with them doing the study, and I'm going to use the word bias again, they're past bias against cars, the fix is in. They can't be trusted. And I know we have to deal with them, but we need to make a resolution that really is an open-minded discussion and takes into consideration the car owners as well.
I think that's what this tries to do. I just want to make the point that, I'll say it a different way, we're not interested in what's theoretically possible, which is what we can get from a research group. We're interested in what's practically possible. And only the city can tell us that. We can hire someone at some think tank and come up with all these ideas for the street, but it doesn't mean anything. We want to get ideas, what? Right, we want to get ideas that can be implemented, and the city, with all of its limitations, is the only game in town, and they're the only one who can come back to us with the authority to make changes on the street. A think tank can't do that.
As many times as you mentioned the Brookings Institution, I thought you were going to suggest we hire them. But so while the city at this point is not really interested in residential parking permits, when congestion pricing begins, and I had this discussion with Ed Pincar, while they may not drive into the Upper East and Upper West Sides, which are already saturated, expensive parking, getting on an already overcrowded subway train, they may well drive to a place like Jamaica Estates, Riverdale, Wakefield. So I have the feeling that folks in those neighborhoods might swell up and say, we need residential parking because we're losing all our spaces.
That's a really good point. Because again, we don't have it now and there's no authority for it now, but things can change, especially if the street use changes. Yes. Who else?
I appreciate that you're not transportation planners and that a lot of care has been put into this, writing this revised resolution. But I do think it's still a little confusing if I was your thesis advisor, this isn't ready for your dissertation. I think what's really confusing is it's not clear if you want to study what the cost of parking is or what the negative effects of parking is, which some of the comments from the public seem to say. What I think you want to study is what are the impacts of congestion pricing. And we know that congestion has increased throughout the city. That is why they introduced congestion pricing. So congestion is happening at 96th Street, but it's also happening south of 59th Street. The problem is congestion pricing is only going to address congestion south of 59th Street, and it has a possibility of having even more negative impacts on congestion north of 59th Street. And so what you really want is the city to study the cost of congestion pricing, and I think all of this language about residential parking and such are just potential solutions that we shouldn't be throwing out there. There's a lot of other transportation tools out there to reduce congestion besides parking. And so I think the committee needs to make a decision. Are you trying to study curbside competition and the best use for your curbs, or are you trying to study congestion and the impact of congestion and how to reduce congestion?
My answer to that is, I don't know what I don't know. We've identified problems, and I'll concede ignorance here. We've identified problems. I'm very much aware of that. And the city controls the streets. What ideas do they have for mitigating these problems? We can reject them all, we can talk about them, it'll begin a dialogue, but I don't know how to ask them the specifics of these individual programs. We're just putting out there a request for possible solutions for the problems we all notice.
I just want to say that I agree with Jay's point, his final point about the meetings needing to be in public and everybody being, I don't like the idea of the separate groups. I think it's just really important that we're very transparent, and I just want to say that I totally agree with Jay.
Who else? Rick.
So two comments. The first one is, in terms of people's concern about bias in the language, two possible amendments. One is, and we're conflicted here because some people have said that we're too prescriptive in saying some possible solutions. Others, and the full board said we need to put in more solutions. And I would say either we say, advise us whether there are, add the word alternate. So the fourth paragraph, advise us, number 2, advise us whether there are alternate policies to the current policy, and then we had changed it to that might provide greater benefit. So just to say, the current policy is one thing that should be explored, maybe it is the best option. And the study could find that the current policy.
It's very clear, advise us as to whether there are policies that could provide, is there something else that could provide these benefits? I think the language is clear.
The other possibility is to get rid of the prescriptive ideas of, but not limited to paid residential parking permits metered with surge capacity. I don't know that we need to tell them anything. It's.
What's the sense of the committee on that?
And then the other comment is, I think.
When you're talking about wording change, you have to be very specific about what paragraph.
You're saying after.
Okay, so I'm saying basically leave in including. So say improve traffic flow and promote safer streets, including studying the practices of other major cities. So getting rid of from the word but to capability.
I still feel strongly about the 6% you'll look at residential.
And I feel equally strongly about the surge.
But they need to know that it's something we're interested in. That's part of our purpose in passing resolutions, is to say that what we're interested in.
You don't ask.
So what do you do?
I just want to say, just as an aside, it's very frustrating because I constantly get comments that go black and white, but I will defer to the consensus of the committee here. Should we take this out or should we leave it in? Straw poll. Take it. Who wants to take it out? The committee. How many? One. You just proposed to take it out. You have everything in hand.
I am.
You can't see.
Sorry.
2.
Okay.
3. Who wants to leave it in? The ins have it. We'll leave it in. It's just illustrative.
Yep.
But not limited to. I mean, we're,
And it may end up not being the focus of what.
I think so just keep in mind, and there are probably a lot of people who are not thrilled with this resolution who would be.
So my other comment is, Jay brought up a pretty strongly felt idea that we shouldn't go out of process. I'm wondering how the committee feels, and if that's something that the committee might weigh in on, whether we stick with our normal process or if we try this new idea.
What's the argument?
Why don't you vote on the resolution
I'd like to vote for resolution.
I'm being asked a question.
Let's just vote on it first and then we go. I'd like to have a part.
No, let's vote on the resolution first.
Okay. There are some minor modifications, adding residents and businesses, last line of paragraph 3, putting in a study, well actually, figure out how to make that grammatical, study the practices of other major cities, implications becomes impact, and create in line 2 of paragraph 3 becomes 4. And with those changes.
Could to might.
No, because we have weather.
Oh, okay.
Weather,
Okay.
Which is the same.
And then under paragraph 2, you changed about the impact of.
Yeah, implications became impact.
Yeah, you're right.
Lessons learned from the practices. How's that? That's grammatical. We don't want to. Okay.
Call the
All the questions. All those in favor of the resolution. Committee first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those opposed. Anyone abstaining? Okay, 9-0-0. 9 committee members in favor of the resolution as amended. 1, 2, 3. 9. You have to be on the committee board. 3. All those opposed. 1, 2, 3. All those abstaining. Okay, it passes unanimously. Great.
Copy of this.
and I really urge everybody to read this. For those in the audience who are interested in reading, you can sure go parking
So the way this will move forward is that it will not be on the full board agenda in January. We're looking for February.